Welcome back to Tezos Explained. My name is Kevin Mehrabi. We're here with the co-founder of Tezos, Arthur Breitman.
Hi there.
We've had so many great talks about all the great technologies coming out on the Tezos X roadmap. Some of the things are things that people have been wanting on Tezos for a very long time. Some things Tezos is doing that it's better than other places we've seen it being done. And some things are just advancements for blockchain in general. I think there's conversations also about L2s and how many are we going to have, not just for us, but for others. But let's just start at the very basic. L1s. Why do we need Tezos? What makes Tezos unique and different from other L1s for someone who has no context of any of this at all?
The first thing I would say is you're talking about L1, L2s, and I think it's a bit of a failure of the industry that anyone is discussing L1 versus L2. In principle, L2 is just like a technique for scaling. And at the end of the day, as a user of a system like this, it is never something you should have to care about. When you are using a CPU, for example, CPUs also have level 1 cache and level 2 cache, and then you have level 3 cache, and then you have main memory and all of that. If you're writing applications and you're coding in assembly language, or you're really care about performance, you're going to care a lot about this.
Yeah.
For anyone using a computer, they never have to care about this. And in some sense, it's a testament to the ongoing UX challenges of this industry that we even have to talk about it. So what is an L1? What is an L2? An L1 typically is your base network. That's where consensus is going to happen. So you're going to have a ledger. It's going to be maintained by validators who form a consensus. They form data availabilities, they execute transactions. Bitcoin would fall into that L1 classification. Use the original Tezos blockchain, Ethereum, Dogecoin, all these L1s. L2 is a scaling solution. So the main difference between an L1 and an L2, and people have many definitions of L2. So Polygon, for example, which is very much an L1 with a centralized bridge to Ethereum, call themselves an L2. So part of it is branding, I guess. But my definition of an L2 would be it does everything that an L1 does, but it doesn't do consensus. It depends on another L1 for its consensus and for its security.
So why is consensus and security better on Tezos, or by the estimation of, I assume yourself and some of us? Why does the world need that when there are others out there that do security and consensus on their own L1s?
I don't think there's a single saying. It's a collection of things. But Tezos launched in 2018, and it was the first blockchain to launch with an actual proof-of-stake mechanism. I say actual because there was something at stake. Before Tezos, you had experiments, you had Peercoin, and then you've had some of these delegated proof-of-stake system. They never had slashing, so there was really never anything at stake. Right? It was proof of coin ownership, but not proof of stake. Right. So Tezos was launched with the first proof of stake. It's had remarkable uptime since 2018. I think the longest the chain was stalled for was maybe a couple hours, many, many years ago. And that's been it. So very resilient, time-tested. I think that's a great answer to have. There's other parts of consensus. One is economic security. We went over the past year from 8% stake on the chain to over 25% stake on the chain. So there's perpetual improvement. If Tezos had to be defined by one thing, and it's not, I would say it's his original commitment to governance and evolution and improvement.
I've always found it to be such a fundamental factor because it informs so many other benefits. For one thing, it makes, I think, a lot of other advantages that much better because it's on the chain that does the on-chain governance, to put it simply. And also, I think it's led for a lot of us a lot of patience for other things to come about, because it's there's chains that don't do the on-chain governance thing, and they have this, but if we're going to do that, I want it on a chain that resolves to a place where there's on-chain governance. So, how do you see it philosophically? How is that manifested in the technologies?
The thing with on-chain governance that we have it's a great thing to have it. And I think everyone should have on-chain governance, no matter how big they are. But most of the benefits of on-chain governance come when you are a large incumbent. The chain that would need the most on-chain governance is Bitcoin. The second chain that needs the most on-chain governance is Ethereum. Is when you're very, very, very big and you need to evolve and you need to be credibly neutral, this is when you absolutely need on-chain governance. The ability also of on-chain governance to basically use inflation funding for creating things. This gets more powerful the larger your market cap is. So it's designed basically for a marketing position. However, there are some ancillary benefits that come with it. And one of it is that, because Tezos was designed to be self-upgradable, a lot of work went into actually making upgrades easy. And if upgrades are easy, it also means that you can innovate and actually be quite fast in your release cycle. So it doesn't come directly from the benefit of Onchain Governance, but you end up with a system that's easy to upgrade. And that's just generally a good thing to have if you want to move quickly.
It keeps things united as well. Not every proposal gets adopted or anywhere close to that sometimes.
Not every proposal gets adopted, but even on top of that, I would say not every proposal gets made.
Yeah.
So in general, like when a proposal is made, there's already been discussion and it's expected it will be adopted. Otherwise, why would you go through the bother of like making a proposal? It's not the case that people, work for months and months and months on proposal and thinking like, we have no idea. Maybe people are going to hate it. No. Let's just put it out there. You feel things out first and then you do the work.
Yeah. And I think there's also this aspect of on-chain governance itself can be upgraded as well.
Yep.
And we've had some upgrades in that regard. Have you thought about maybe where ideas could go? We've had dozens of upgrades at this point. I mean, there's been a lot of reflection, of course.
I mean, there's the fun stuff to think about. If I were to think of really useful amendments to the governance procedure itself that would move the needle today, they would be boring things. One would be trying to adjust the cycles so that activations come during business hours. There are always a team of engineers looking at the activation just in case something goes wrong, and it hasn't happened in years, right? But just in case. And sometimes that's going to be at 4 a.m. on Saturday.
Yeah.
Coinbase is going to watch its speaker when an activation happens and Kraken and all of the people.
Right.
So if you could just pick a time where most people are awake, that's probably better for everyone. Not on a Friday, but it's a bit boring. But actually, this is a big quality of life thing.
Right.
You could do shortening the cycle a little bit. Those are the two things that would come on top of my mind as moving the needle quite a bit. A lot more than some of the fancier stuff.
Something I've always really appreciated is how when we saw the explosion of the art community and the way in which that happened, which was not by design, it was so organic. People promoting it who had adopted it the previous day, Ikitnung did not have any central marketing. It was just very hands-off in that regard, that there was this sort of manifesting of the values of decentralized community coming into the platform and the community that was being built as a product on Tezos. And they're maybe using the Tezos name as this sort of connecting rallying cry. It was about art. It wasn't about the governance, but there was still some kind of a common thread there that was able to translate over. So I wonder also, as now we're seeing new brands come in, canonical rollups are brands of their own, as we're going to be seeing with Justice, as we're seeing with Etherlink, and we'll see how it continues to progress. How do we maintain and reflect the original Tezos values in the new brands as they come in, and the new communities that maybe we get to adopt or bring in because of those things?
I agree with you. I think there's an ethos around the Tezos ecosystem that permeates. Maybe it comes from this governance model, but it's a bit intangible, but it exists. Mm-hmm. There's several things that can be done around branding, especially around the branding of Tezos X and the different pieces of it. And there's pros and cons and trade-offs everywhere. One solution is no sub-brands, just unify brands. You have a huge benefit here, which is you have a simple message. You're not like a confusing house of brands. You just have the Tezos brand and that's it. And that's all people have to know. Then you can have the multiple brands. So multiple brands lets you do a couple more things. Mm-hmm. You can experiment with different branding. Yeah. So you don't have to commit the big master brand. You can explore. We are in an industry where people are attracted by novelty. I think there's a really strong narrative around Tezos by saying it's been there for a long time. It's very stable. It's evolved, but it hasn't changed. Right. It's Tezos, you know it. But there's also value in novelties. You can say oh, look, it's new. It's Etherlink, for example. Yeah. It's Justice. It's all of this thing. So there's value in that, but you also dilute your branding efforts, obviously, if you're doing that, because now you have to brand two different things. And my general gut feeling around this has been to do a bit of a fan out and then fan in strategy. Fan out at first, and then bring everything back into Tezos X. Yeah. One ecosystem that has contended with this has been Polkadot, because Polkadot from the very, very beginning has been very focused on parachains. So it's similar to an L1, L2 model, except, everything is L2, right? So in a Polkadot environment, you have all these different chains. And they did brand some of them. So, they had Moonbeam, for example, that they branded. When Near did an EVM compatibility zone, they also branded it as Aurora. So there are some precedents here where people have branded as different subsystems. I think there's value in it. There's cost in it. So that they get balance.
Yeah, here's a fine line between outreach, brand, and fragmentation. And finding that harmony is something that, even if you get it right, there's always stuff you learn.
An interesting example of fragmentation as well is all of these aggregator websites with statistics, like DeFi Llama and DApp Radar and all of that. I noticed in CoinSpace, for example, again, like Polkadot, interesting example, they listed as Polkadot ecosystem. Yeah. And they have the combined TPS. One thing that I feel is important is like you don't want to be listed as different roll-ups and chain. You want to consolidate those numbers to show the strengths.
Right.
So you want to have like something like Tezos X, and that's an umbrella that contains these different zones.
Lately, we've seen a lot of changes in the news, in regulatory policy, in business, the industrialization, some are calling it, of blockchain crypto with Circle and with strategy, and a lot of movement towards what people are hoping is a watershed moment for all institutions to come in. Now, what fundamentals about Tezos, Onchain Governance, and what reflects from it do you think would maybe be seen now for the first time? Because you've come from those institutions, you've come from these big banks.
I think like from an institutional perspective, like looking at Tezos, the main thing that would make the appeal is the longevity, stability, and general seriousness. I think the governance is a positive selling point overall. It takes a lot of foresight to see the benefit of governance, saying, for example, that you're not going to be at the mercy of a stablecoin issuer for determining what happens on the chain. So we've seen those conversations in tokenization, specifically knowing like what happens to tokenized assets if there's a fork in a chain. It's a positive point, but it would not be a dominating argument.
Do you think the trend will lean towards these financial actuaries taking note of, well, this thing could have a contentious hard fork? Probably not, but what does that do to the value of these assets when it comes to things like underwriting and all this stuff that don't matter now, but in the future?
I see people learn by catastrophe, not by foresight.
That's so sad, though. We're going to have to see maybe a tragedy happen, and maybe we'll learn our lessons and maybe we won't.
Yep.
Crypto has seen both, but Tezos will be here regardless. Tezos has a longevity factor.
Yeah, that's the point.
Yes. Okay, well, Arthur Breitman, thank you so much.
Thanks for coming here.
Thank you.